When you build a dynasty, you aren't just drafting players, you're building a legacy. I'm Bob Harris. It's time to go on the hot seat. But first, footballguys.com. That's the website. Appreciate you joining me here every Tuesday for the show. Hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, all the YouTube stuff. Share, like, hit the comments, do all that stuff. We love it when you do that. And as always, I have a great guest to put on the hot seat, this time a fellow staff member from Football Guys, the great Jeff Bell. You can find him on the X at For Whom J Bell Tolls. You also find his work. Look, you haven't seen him. There's only one reason Jeff has not already been on the hot seat. Jeff's very busy. Rookie draft guide work has been ongoing, just finally released. Jeff, welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you so much, Bob. It's great to be here. And you're exactly right. It's a busy time of year. And actually, we are stepping out of the busy time of year. And that's why I am able to be here. And thank you very much for the invite.
Yeah, with the draft over, you can get the 2025 Rookie Draft Guide. It's version 3.0 pack with everything you need to crush your draft, updated everything to reflect the new teams, roles, opportunities. So whether you're prepping for a rookie draft or sizing up trade values, version 3.0 is your blueprint. Also, we've started up the daily email update, the Football Guys daily email update. You can sign up for free, get the biggest stories in football summarized, explained, and sent directly to your inbox each and every day. Don't miss out on that. And so with rookie drafts, there's also Dynasty Start-Up Drafts. And I think, Jeff, that's where a lot of people, there's some tough calculations to be made in there. And it's not always easy to figure out when the time is to shift from like valuing rookies to valuing veteran players that still have some time left. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and I think it'll be very helpful. When we'll start the quarterback position, in the big picture, how important is it to secure a long-term cornerstone for your dynasty team?
Well, I think diving into Dynasty, you're having two different conversations here because Superflex does tend to dominate the conversation in Dynasty. In one quarterback, I don't think quarterback's all that important, to be honest with you, because when you're kind of running through ranks right now, you get to quarterback 12, 13, it's like Bo Nix, Kyler Murray. I mean, if you can have both of those guys on your Dynasty team when the rest of the league has pretty much forgotten about the position, I think you're okay there. I think in Superflex, though, it's kind of, I've seen some shifts throughout the last couple of years in Dynasty because it did seem to be a window where, especially last year, it seemed to be you'd do a startup and the first 8 or 9 picks would always be quarterbacks. Now, this past year, from the startups that I've seen, it's been a little bit more split where people are willing to take position players over some of these quarterbacks before. I think some of that might be the youth that we saw come in last year with Drake May, Caleb Williams, so many talented quarterbacks there, shifting that mindset maybe a little bit. And then probably on the other end, you're having Patrick Mahomes that he's always been this staple in the 101 in a lot of Superflex drafts that he's not done it for us for fantasy for a couple years.
Right. I think that kind of depends on the design of the offense. It seems like the Chiefs might be kind of aiming more towards reestablishing the deep game and leaning a little more heavily on Mahomes, but they haven't the last couple of years, and the results, you're right, haven't been good. So you bring up a really good point. So how do you weigh the safety of an established veteran like a Patrick Mahomes or Jalen Hurts? Like a lot of his scoring is based on the tush push. I mean, the rushing touchdowns have been a huge thing, and they're not necessarily a sticky stat, but in his case, it seems to be. But then you have the guys you mentioned, Caleb Williams, in a great situation, we think, with Ben Johnson coming in. They're building a great cast around him. They've added to the middle of the offensive line some of the same things that Carolina did to get Bryce Young on track. The Chicago Bears are doing with Caleb Williams. Bo Nix also seems to be in a good situation with Sean Payton seeming to be all in on him. So where is the point that you weigh that? Is it strictly pricing or is there maybe more to it than that? Are you looking at the longer term futures?
I allow value to dictate everything that I do in fantasy, but I think when I'm looking at those two, I'm youth to a default. When I'm in a startup, I will always take the youth, and I've gotten a lot of great deals on Trey Lance that tells me that I don't always go the right direction on grabbing that youth. So that's kind of one of those things that you're playing with fire there a little bit. And quarterback, I think you can be out of all the positions because of the shelf life of players. I think you can defer a little bit more towards safety on the veterans relative to some of the other positions. So I would be willing more on quarterback. Like I'll have a guy like Joe Burrow ranked above Caleb Williams, even though that age gap at another position, there's no way I would have a player in their late 20s ranked above a player that's 22, 23 years old. And so that's where probably those differences lie, and just kind of tiering it out. And I think right now, I mean, Jane Daniels, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson seem to be a little bit ahead of everybody else when you step into a tier, and just trying to get one of those three guys as a cornerstone piece.
Yeah, I think the pricing to me is the big issue there, right? Like, what's the opportunity cost? What am I missing out on by grabbing that guy? And you mentioned super flex drafts. I think, there's the fear of getting shut out of runs at the quarterback position. It's certainly real in like regular redraft leagues. You mean quarterbacks will come flying off, and if you're not part of the fund, you're going to get hosed. Is there something to be said about, taking chances on more developmental players and not worrying as much about the runs as long as you have a good anchor player?
I think yes, and we are in a super flex draft right now, but that's redraft, and we are drafting together there. And I've got Josh Allen to start the draft off, and I don't have a second quarterback right now, and so that's where
I noticed
having
that.
Josh Allen as that kind of that anchor, he's my anchor there, and you can get a little bit more risky. I mean, Dynasty's interesting right now, and you're talking about the top 24 quarterbacks. You're looking at, I mean, Tua is quarterback 24, Justin Fields quarterback 25 in Dynasty via keep trade cut, Sam Darnold quarterback 26, Geno Smith quarterback 28. Some of these guys outside of the top 24, if you're thinking about, well, there's 12 teams in my league, 24 quarterbacks should go off the board, absent somebody being aggressive and moving in other directions, you feel like you can do pretty well flirting around that quarterback 24 range right now, especially if you do have one of those anchor pieces. Absent having one of those anchor pieces, I think that's where you get a little bit more aggressive and make sure that you grab a couple of guys in the top into maybe that middle tier or that area there. But I've always been a big believer on, quarterbacks and superflex are the most valuable asset. I want the very best that I can do there. But at the same time, I want to differentiate my roster. And if a great wide receiver is sitting there because somebody's grabbing quarterback instead, I don't think it's the wrong thing to do to grab that great wide receiver.
Right. Are you interested in some of the rookies in this year's class that are maybe going to take a little time? Jalen Milroe comes to mind. It's like I kind of see him as, if things came together the right way, he could be a potential league winning kind of quarterback. I mean, we've seen that rushing ability serve players well, said Jaden Daniels and Lamar Jackson and many others, right?
Yeah.
So, or a player maybe like Tyler Shuck, who finds himself in a position suddenly to be competing. It seems like some of this might have been known in advance in New Orleans, some of the occurrences. In case you missed it, Derek Carr retired. And Shuck was the biggest investment they've made in a quarterback since Archie Manning.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the rookies, you're betting on the archetype. At least that's the way that I'm going to approach it. And so I'll bet on Jalen Milroe because I know if he's going to be the starting quarterback, he's got the tool set to be a top 12, top end fantasy quarterback. Whereas maybe a guy like Jackson Dart, while he got first round draft capital, like kind of what's the ceiling for Jackson Dart? Is this an opportunity? Can he run a little bit more than what we've seen in college? Or is this Jared Goff where I'm great, I've got quarterback 18, but I've got quarterback 18 and it makes me feel good that I hit on the rookie pick and you've locked in one of those young quarterbacks if that does hit, but that range of outcomes is a lot different conversation than Jalen Milroe.
Let's move on to the running backs. They age quickly, as everybody knows. So how aggressive should you be when you're working when you're building your roster and when you're managing it?
Yeah, I think that the way I view it is you've got Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Ashton Genty, maybe even Omari Hampton. If you view that right there at the top, I mean, if the value falls right for me to grab a Travion Henderson or a player like that, I'm fine there. Once you kind of step into the back end, that's where it kind of has to be a finishing piece for me of like a Derrick Henry. If I'm going to have Derrick Henry on my roster, it's because I feel like I'm set at quarterbacks. I feel like I'm set at wide receivers, and maybe I can get Derrick Henry from a team that might be rebuilding or looking at something else and for a rookie second and maybe a player down the tier a little bit. That's where I think I value those top end guys. And it's talk about players changing fast because even a year ago, having this conversation, we would have said Breece Hall is one of those top end guys, and he's fallen off. His value's fallen off relative to some of these other players. But I think I'm a big believer that because of the depth of Dynasty and because what you're able to do, you can add players throughout your roster, have a deep bench of backup running backs, and you fall into a Rico Dowdle or something like that covers that running back 2 position for a season last year. We see these running backs come out of nowhere and be plug-in players. And so I think outside of being that top end value. I think it's better to, like, Saquon Barkley, I'd probably would be thinking about moving on right now relative to a couple years ago where you could have bought Saquon Barkley. And again, that's where Dynasty comes into play on that
Right.
value game a little bit of, I'm going to buy low here on Saquon Barkley ideally, and he's going to obviously lands in a better situation. Now you're feeling like, well, I mean, he flirted with 2,000 rushing yards. He was the running back one in fantasy. Probably a sell high window potentially.
Right. So if you're drafting in a startup league, what is the tipping point? Where do you like switch off guys? Like, and I think Barkley, you're probably not switching off in a startup. I don't think you're switching off, but let's say there's Alvin Kamara or Joe Mixon, right? And maybe some of your choices are Travion Henderson, who lands in the Patriots with a little bit of an obstacle to workload. Caleb Johnson, same in Pittsburgh. And you could say the same about Hampton as well, with Najee Harris there for a year. What is the tipping point? Where do you err in the side of youth and the uncertainty of the role versus the veteran, where you're pretty certain in the role, but it's going to time out?
In a startup, I'm always going with youth, and it's just something that I've always done in startups, and I'm fine losing the first year in a league because it's worked well for me. You lose that first year and you add the rookie 101, and this is a player that would have been a first round pick in that startup. You get an extra first round pick. Meanwhile, you've drafted young, and now your roster has begun to develop and stepped into being a winning roster at that level. And so that's where I'll always go youth until, usually if you're going to ask me about a veteran, especially a veteran running back, I will say that somebody else will value him more than I will,
Probably
basically,
me.
during the startup. But I mean, I certainly get to a level where, thinking about a startup like round 12, 13 ish, where like if one of those veterans are still sitting there, happy to grab him there. But ideally, if I'm doing that, I'm kind of immediately thinking of, if this guy hits, I'm planning on kind of not being the best team year one. Maybe I can flip this off for a rookie pick and kind of go that direction. So that's usually, and I think it's the productive struggle approach. And I think that people can get trapped in that in Dynasty, and there's a lot of people that are fine losing in Dynasty, and that's just what they do because their roster's pretty. I don't want to do that, but I think that because of the value that you're able to add with that 101, and because those leagues can be in such flux, and you'll get people that will step into a startup and they'll go veteran heavy, and then hopefully they don't leave the league, but some people do leave the league. But you can see in a startup of like, well, that's going to be a really difficult team to deal with year one, but what are we talking about in year three? Whereas my mindset in Dynasty is, especially in a startup, I'm always making a move that I want to gain value, that I think that player is going to gain value from this point forward.
I think there's a little bit of a feeling at running back that you can cobble something together, right? You can take some chances, like, I don't know. It's hard for me to pass up on Derrick Henry, on the roll, on the sure volume, even if it's just for a year, thinking I could either figure it out in next year's draft or make a trade or pick somebody up as a free agent. So I guess, that's kind of where I'm at. So I think the roles and landing spots matter. Is that like too far off your path? Like I'm looking for a certain volume, or the what I see as the clearest path to certain volume. Does that outweigh talent for running backs early on for you?
I don't think it does. Not at all. I think that we've seen it time and time again. Running back is an opportunity position, and players that get the opportunity can put up points relative to if we think that they're a great player or we think that they're not that good of a player. I mean, there's some level of maybe security that a team, if they've got a great player, an Ashton Genty, we would not expect the Raiders to go and draft another running back right away. Right. So you're feeling like there's some certainty there, but at the same time, we've seen, I mean, Ken Walker hitting his rookie year, and then Zach Charbonnet gets added, and we see it happen.
That was a Seattle staple, right? That was the Pete Carroll
coach there,
hand, right? Like, so so exactly correct. So I think that's it's worth watching anyway. And I think like there's different approaches. Some are more successful than others. I would like to remind our listeners that Jeff wins a lot more dynasty leagues than Bob Harris. So take that part in hand. Also, you can check out all our rankings of Football Guys. Dynasty rankings are up as well. Jeff will be updating his throughout the course of the offseason. I have my redraft rankings up and available. Projections are there as well. The team they're doing a great job at Football Guys of keeping that up to date. Let's look at the wide receivers. Typically, we have a longer production window. How does that shape your early picks? How much are you working in that developmental time if necessary?
I'm expecting wide receivers to hit right away. I guess at this point
Okay.
is kind of where
The high
we
end.
just the high end, yes, high end wide receivers. I'm expecting to hit right away, and I'm a little bit. I'm not probably as concerned as some can be, and especially in the dynasty community, there seems to be a microwave culture of, a guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba. We knew year one he's playing with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. He probably wouldn't have the best rookie year, and but the knee jerk reaction to that rookie year was pretty aggressive. And I think Roma Dunes, they were seeing that now a little bit, a knee jerk reaction to stepping into that situation with DJ Moore with Keenan Allen last year. But I do expect production early just because we've seen it. You see a guy like obviously Jamar Chase, obviously
Right.
Justin Jefferson, what they did their rookie years, Brian
Malik
Thomas this
Neighbors
past
last
year,
year.
Malik Neighbors,
Yeah.
these players, they're coming into the league much more developed than maybe they were a couple generations ago in terms of the passing game, but also uh, you're talking about an elite athlete operating in space, and that tends to work pretty well for elite athletes. That spatial awareness is a kind of a natural thing that I think great players have. So I think all those play things tend to lean into it. But I, again, hammer youth throughout, and I've coached some people in dynasty, and I've walked through some people through startup drafts and explain to them of, well, here's your options here. You can go with the 28-year-old wide receiver, or there's also this 22-year-old wide receiver, and
Right.
maybe your production might be a little bit different, but in 2 years, you're probably going to like it a little bit more if you go with the 2020 or the 22-year-old wide receiver here. And kind of once you walk somebody through, like the way I approach startups or what they see the end result there, they usually don't tend to stray off that moving forward.
So I think it's fair to say there will be far less Tyreek Hill and Cooper Cup on your roster than Garrett Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr. But let's just say, and this
Yeah.
feels like I'm fading the Ohio State fan here. Like it seems like Ohio State guys take their sweet time, get the first year breakout apparently. And Emeka Ibuka is going to be a similar spot in Tampa Bay this year, it seems. So those guys are going to take a little time. What are your thoughts on, like you're sitting there in a draft and the prices are, somewhat in the same range? Like, is it always going to be a Garrett Wilson, even though there's a little uncertainty with the franchise, with the offense, where you feel like there's less with Hill? But granted, he, coming off a horrible year. I think Cooper Cup, it's easier to make an argument to avoid. And Marvin Harrison, it's easy to make an offer to jump or make an argument to jump in, right?
Yes, and I'm always going to defer to the younger wide receiver just because if we see, you're looking at dynasty values here, and if you see the production pull anywhere close to even, where that young player is going on market value relative to that where that vet is going on market value. So it's like you need like a massive spread. I feel like because when it comes down to, I vividly remember 2 years ago Tyreek Hill. Having off the 2023 season, I had Tyreek Hill on a dynasty team, and somebody straight up offered me Garrett Wilson for him. And at the time, like I took it. I was like, well, I'll take Garrett Wilson. And at the time, it was like, well, maybe I'm selling a little bit low on Tyreek Hill. And now with 2024 kind of being the way that it was for Tyreek Hill and some questions around him there, even though Garrett Wilson didn't exactly rocket ship the way that we were hoping to see, I mean, that trade looks pretty good right immediately right now. And so I think established players like that, but like I knew I had a really good idea that Garrett Wilson obviously was a very good NFL player. It's just that I didn't get the elite production yet. But had he been a player that just kind of looked like he didn't belong or something like that off of his rookie year, that's a different conversation entirely.
So is there such a thing as too much youth in a receiver's room? I'm guessing from your answer, it's no, but do you want some kind of veteran anchor or someone? And like, let's just say, like if you have a Christian McCaffrey or a Derrick Henry or a Tyreek Hill or whatever, those guys are for sale as soon as you buy them, right? Like if somebody comes along and makes you a reasonable offer, you're gonna listen to every offer for them, right? I mean, that makes sense too. But also getting that, getting some value out of them while they can. But how much is too much youth, especially at wide receiver?
I think I look at it as kind of you got your foundation here, and I guess maybe I wouldn't look at Derrick Henry as being a foundation player, but my approach to dynasty. But if my foundation is I've got two strong quarterbacks in Superflex, my wide receivers are set, and I feel like I'm going to win a championship, I love rostering Derrick Henry. I'm all for that. But it's one of those that once the foundations, it's like I want to build a nice solid house that I'm not worried about a natural disaster blowing over, and once that's all done, then we could do some landscaping, or we can do like maybe you want a gazebo in the backyard, or like those types of things. Like that's kind of like a Derrick Henry's and a really nice gazebo in the backyard, in the middle of a butterfly garden. Meanwhile, I've got my fortress of solitude already built.
Do you not feel like at some point in a dynasty startup, you feel like you're going to win, right? Like you're I do feel like there could be different approaches, like the long build approach, but like, hey, it's year one. I have as good a chance of winning a title as anybody in this first season, and there's pieces available that I know or I feel like are going to be super productive at the right price. I don't care how old they are, especially at running back, where I
Yeah.
feel like I can make the adjustment as I need. So like I'm,
Yes.
like maybe a little aggressive and maybe a little arrogant coming out thinking, man, I'm going to win this league year one, but also taking the chances to do that, knowing maybe less so at wide receiver, right? I mean, like that's more a position where I feel like you have to invest more in the longer term. But at running back, that's not my worry as much.
Yeah, and that's where you step into, like, once you get out of the first 8 rounds or so, like you're kind of looking like that's where I will have a little bit more appetite for a veteran there.
Right.
Of if it's just a random like a Trey Harris or like something like that, or like a random shot in the dark on a day 3 or day 2 rookie wide receiver that I don't necessarily love, or a veteran that I feel like this guy's going to be a week 1 starter for me, I'll go ahead and pull that trigger there on the vet. But that's probably like where I break on that between rounds like 10 to 13, or like, because once you're kind of around like 16 or so, like you're kind of just throwing shots in the dark at that point. I think that's the area that, and like I vividly remember doing a staff startup that we did a couple years ago, and I got Keenan Allen and I got Mike Evans for cheap, and in that staff startup, and like I'm talking like 11th round, 12th round type Mike Evans, and I was able to flip them for rookie pieces. Year 1, my team was bad via plan, and then year 2 last year, I was in the title game. So that flipped
Yeah.
around pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think the approach matters, right? It definitely does. So at tight end, the approach is going to matter. So, like, I guess this is a position that's a little different, right? Because the dearth of high end talent that seems to be there. So, first of all, how much should scarcity impact your strategy? And if it is impacting, where do guys like Travis Kelsey and George Kittle fit in against Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren's, the guys coming in who, like, we think they're in good spots, but are they for sure? And I mean, Kittle for sure. I mean, has been super consistent, but definitely getting up there in years.
Yeah, it's interesting because you can, like, there's a massive fade on Mark Andrews, like even Travis Kelsey's being
Yeah.
incredibly devalued at this point. I'm at the point I'm doing best balls now, and like that round 8,
Me
round
too.
9 Travis Kelsey is just like an auto draft for me, of like I'm going to take 9th round Travis Kelsey every single time. But no, it's playing that out in Dynasty because Brock Bowers kind of changed the conversation. Sam Laporta right before that, the year before that, changed the conversation. Trey McBride, you've got these guys at the top, these young guys that are locked in as cornerstone pieces, that the acquisition price on them was really reasonable if you got them as rookies. So, I mean, that's a big part of it. And then you're expecting, so we see where Tyler Warren, we see where Colson Loveland comes in right after that. But I feel like, I don't know. We always, it's like the running joke of tight ends deep, and I don't think that tight ends deep, but I do think that a guy like, if you were to cobble something together with like an Evan Ingram and a Kate Otten, I
Right.
don't think you're losing that position right out of the gate. Versus, but I mean, obviously, if Trey McBride and Brock Bowers keep doing what they did, McBride towards the later portion of last year, Bowers the entire year, that's going to be like a really, it's like the Death Star almost on some of these rosters, a really difficult piece for somebody to deal with.
I feel like McBride is a guy that's going to be the right price with the upside because he hasn't had the touchdown production. Hopefully, he can get some positive regression there. And you wonder if that role is how repeatable Bauer's role is. I mean,
Yeah.
look, I think he's going to be the wide receiver one essentially on that team as opposed to a traditional tight end, but they are adding more pieces. So that makes it interesting. So, what about Loveland and Warren? They're the top of the heap. Is the price worth it for them in Dynasty, or will you rather wait and get a bargain on maybe, or a relative bargain on some of the other newcomers in this year's draft?
I think so. In rookie drafts, I think the price is definitely worth it on them. I've been getting a lot of them in rookie drafts because they're falling to the end of the second round, the end of the first round, or even the beginning of the second round. I've gotten Tyler Warren at like 201, 202 in some drafts, and it's kind of like, what's going on here, guys? But because people are valuing like Caleb Johnson over them, and I'm gonna take the tight end that went top 10 over the running back that went in the 90s, but that's just me. But anyways, you're looking at startups though, I think it's really interesting. Like the difference of values for dynasty is fascinating to me because I feel like these players are valued differently in a startup than they are in your rookie draft, because in a startup people are looking at, well, I need to build my roster, I need to build my starting lineup, I don't have a tight end, I'm going to take Colson Loveland in round 5 or round 6. Whereas like if they were just sitting there with the 111 rookie pick in, where they're going to take that in that round, I don't necessarily know that's the case. And so I think you run into that a little bit with those players. Again, what I've seen the rookie draft value being a little bit different. I think people wanting to build a roster, build a starting lineup when they're in dynasty startups tends to lean into that. And then you kind of run into the opposite end of it, of you get some of these players like a Roma Dunze again, where somebody that drafted them last year as a rookie spent a top 6 or whatever pick on it was, and like that sunk cost of like, well, I can't let that go. I mean, I just spent here, versus when you're a startup, people will say, well, I'm a little bit uncertain about that situation, I don't know if I want to make that bet on that situation. I think it's so fascinating on like the different ways that players can be acquired onto a roster, how it affects their value in dynasty.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. Does premium scoring change this a lot for you at tight end, or do you think the relative values, relatively speaking, hold up pretty well for the tight ends? Maybe you shift everybody up a little bit, but relatively speaking,
It does, in terms of makes me feel like I can use them for a flex. And so that's kind of big. Like a guy like Jonnu Smith, there was a way that he was producing in the second half of last year. You're able to play him as a flex play relative to a running back or a wide receiver. And I think that super flex there affects the value. I think when it's not super flex, as long as I feel like I've got one guy, I feel pretty good there. Whereas if it is a tight end premium, that's where I'm fine rostering a little bit more options. And probably if it's not a premium and I've got that position locked down and another player emerges on my roster, that's where I might be a little bit more aggressive on trying to trade them for another running back or wide receiver, kind of go in that direction, just to be able to have those difference making players within your roster. Because if you're not playing tight end premium, it's not that often that you run into wanting to flex a tight end.
yeah. One last tight end question, because I think it's on everyone's mind. You mentioned the best balls. I'm out there. I've seen Kyle Pitts going as tight end 18 on our dynasty rankings. He's tight end 13. Is there any hope out there for Kyle Pitts? Are we still betting on the talent and the youth? He's still a fairly young player, right?
I am a firm. I will hold my shares on Pitts Island until the tsunami is over. But I definitely believe in this, and I think that the biggest thing. So his rookie year, he was really good as a rookie. He
Yeah.
played with Matt Ryan. He was excellent, 1,000 yards. He didn't really have the touchdowns that maybe we would hope, and then he had some injuries, and he was playing with Desmond Ritter. Some other questions there. I think the biggest thing last year is Kirk Cousins wasn't able to get him the ball where you need to get Kyle Pitts the ball. Kirk Cousins
Right.
couldn't hit those 15-yard digs over the middle where you want to hit Kyle Pitts, because everything was floating on him. He didn't have the velocity to get it in there. And then when you saw Michael Penix come in late in the year, the play that really stands out to me is the end of that Washington game when they had to have it. And they hit Kyle Pitts on that. I think it was maybe about a 30-yard play, 30-yard touchdown right at the sticks, like right at the goal line, just drives it into a small window that there's no way Kirk Cousins could have driven that into. Pitts holds on, scores the touchdown. They didn't pull that game out, but that was one of those that, okay, well, Kirk Cousins couldn't put the ball there. This is exactly where you want Kyle Pitts to be operating, and Michael Penix is able to do that. So I'm buying all the discount that I can on Kyle Pitts right now.
I have a piece ready for a future fantasy notebook on Kyle Pitts, and the little subheading for that will be Hope Springs Eternal. I want to close this out, Jeff, with a little bit of a lightning round. Just some quick takes on players like, I want to talk about some of your favorite targets. Who's your favorite quarterback target in a startup draft right now?
Well, this is it's almost like we do this for a living, Bob, but Michael Penix is my favorite quarterback startup value right now because it's just he seems forgotten, and I'm not really sure
Yes.
why. And it's fascinating to me because he was good when he played. I think that when he was on the field, we were thrilled with everything we saw. You see him playing with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. You're like, this is great, and Arthur Smith's not here to ruin it anymore. And so you're like, but why is nobody wanting to buy this? And so that's where I think it's absolutely fascinating, and it's my favorite value.
Price has not caught up on him. I don't think the price has caught up on Bryce Young. I'm a believer. I thought that what we saw from the Kansas City game on uh, is the guy that they talked about when they drafted him. And look who did it, got it done. It was Dave Canales, who seems to have that way with quarterbacks. Your favorite running back target in
Ray
startups right
Davis, gonna go with
now?
the
Ooh,
homer pick right here. Ray Davis, I think
James Cook
we
holdout coming.
James Cook. I mean, the one that sticks with me is when Brandon Bean kind of had the comment of uh, because the Bills were very, very aggressive with re-signing players this offseason, and they did a great job of getting in under market. And then somebody asked him, like, you kind of about James Cook, what's the deal? And he was basically like, we've re-signed the players that we're going to re-sign, more or less, is kind of what his comment was, of like, we're moved on from that chapter of the offseason, and we're focused on the draft. And so I think Ray Davis sitting right now is a little bit of an under the radar value that if a Cook holdout does come, what's happening there with
For sure.
his value. But if Cook is no longer on the team and they take another round 3 or round 4 running back, Davis should stand as the player that steps right in and the next opportunity.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. There's a lot of players out there like that. Jets have a couple too, Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. Also, I still like Chase Brown. I think the moves the Bengals did not make so far this offseason, maybe they could do something else. Suggest a heavy workload for him going forward. Your favorite wide receiving target for startups?
Kyle Williams. And I think Kyle
Mm,
Williams right now, he was the best pick in rookie drafts because the ADP on sleeper wasn't correct. And so
right.
you would, if you were in, unless you were in a dialed in sharp draft, like I was able to get like early mid third round Kyle Williams occasionally because people just forget that he was there, and think you see something probably similar in startup drafts right now. And so I love that value there to be able to grab him as a player that could project as Drake May's top target for the next 10 years or so if
Right.
everything works out correctly. I think the value that you're getting relative to what you can get there is just fantastic. And so I'm going with Kyle Williams.
I like the Chargers trade Harris because I like all the Harrises for one thing. Also, I think he's it's the Sesame Street rule of analysis. One of these things is not like the other. At some point, he will be the thing, not like Lad McConkey, and those will be the things that matter in this receiving game. Your favorite tight end target?
Pat Fryermuth. I'm just a sucker for Pat Fryermuth, and some of that's we see great. We see George Pickens moved out there, and kind of who's the other target outside of DK Metcalf at this point. It's right now it's Pat Fryermuth, unless Aaron Rodgers brings a couple of his special friends along. But that's kind of, I think he's completely forgotten about, and you're looking at him as a outside of the top 20 occasionally, and it's been a little bit of this of like you not get consistent production, but at the same time, I think he's looked very, very good. And it's just, I think for tight end, he's entering that age window where you get those seasons that click with some of these players. Like I'm thinking about David Njoku like 2 years ago, where David Njoku, it's like we keep buying in and like keep buying in, and you're just not really getting it, and then everything just works. Or last year for Jonnu Smith, like similar to
Yeah.
that. I think that Fryer Muth has within his range of outcomes one of those types of seasons.
Yeah, the heavy usage last year for Johnu Smith. It was like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle were vying for second fiddle to Johnu Smith in that passing attack every week. I myself like Mason Taylor, the rookie
Yes.
tight end. Don't necessarily like his landing spot. Would have preferred Mason Taylor, the Charger, to Mason Taylor, the Jet. But still, I like the talent, like the way the player looks.
But
So, do
but
you have a
let's
player?
that landing real quick on that though.
Go ahead.
Landing spot though on that though, because it
It's a
could be
clear path,
the very,
right?
very clear path. And we've seen
Sure,
Justin Fields rely on Cole
it's
Kmet
true.
before, and he could be the number 2 target earner. And I think that's really what you want with the tight end.
I'd like him to be the number 3 target earner for Justin Herbert. That's just me. I have specific wishes. Is there any player like I almost hate to ask this question because for me, every player at the right price. That's my motto. There is nobody off the table. Do you have anyone that you're not interested in?
Um, I I am the same way with you. Probably there's just there's a fair and right price for every player, and it's usually like I feel like as you play more fantasy, as you get more into it, of like the Island of Misfit Toys, you're kind of like, you,
Yep.
I like to kind of go with like the ugly duckling here, and for the like a Najee Harris, like something like that, where everybody
For
decides
sure.
Najee Harris is terrible, and I'm like, well, I mean, he's probably gonna get the ball a lot in an offense that's gonna run the ball a lot, and you can probably, I mean, if he's completely forgotten about, you get some production there. Like Javonte Williams, I feel like is similar of like the
Me
Island of
too.
Misfit Toys of basically like, hey, but he could be the Cowboys starting running back, and you can't just dismiss that entirely.
It's true. Whoever hurt my feelings in the past, I feel like they're just giving me a discount in the future. I feel like it's a two-edged sword. And on Najee, again, support all Harris's people. I'm all for that. Support Jeff Bell. You can follow him on X at for whom J Bell tolls. You got the Blue Sky as well. What's the
I do. It's same on all the
same?
socials. So
Football diehard here on X and the Blue Ski. So you can find me there. Well, check all his work, Jeff Bell's work at footballguys.com, especially the rookie draft guide, 2025 rookie draft guide version 3.0 up and running. Great work on that, Jeff.
thank you.
I almost said something I shouldn't have said. It's an impressive piece of work, and one that I'll lean on to heavily. Also, the daily email update is up and running. You get the biggest stories in football every single day brought to your inbox. I'm Bob Harris. Thanks again for joining us on the hot seat. I'll see you next week.